Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I hope you had a fantastic weekend. I tell you, I'm so sore today. I've shared with you that a storage building that my friend and I have had rented for the last 3 years, they sold that property and gave us not near enough time to get out, had to find a building and blah, blah, blah. Both Saturday and yesterday, I worked, and this morning, I've got places that are sore that I almost forgot I had places like that. Wow. I'll be headed to the chiropractor here after a while. But, boy, we worked hard, but we're almost done. Anyway, we are looking at the 70 weeks of Daniel. And I've been in the process over the last couple of videos of explaining my view of the interim between the first half of the 70th week and the second half. And the first half is Jesus' ministry. The second half is the Jewish war. Now, I've shared with you that the dispensational view of inserting a 2,000-year gap between the 69th and the 70th week is simply untenable. Likewise, there are many preterists who believe that the 70 weeks of Daniel ended in AD 33, 34, 35, somewhere right along in there. Very commonly, it is claimed with the stoning of Stephen. I find that to be an untenable position. I believe that it violates the concept that the Jewish festal calendar underlies, and I would say is really the crux interpretum, the key to properly understanding Daniel chapter 9. I have shared with you that right there in the language of Daniel chapter 9, we find references to the Jewish calendar. 70 weeks are determined to put away sin. That's the sacrificial system. 70 weeks are determined to make the atonement. More on that in a bit. Well, nothing is more inherently, intrinsically, fundamentally tied to the feast days than the making of atonement. 70 weeks are determined to bring in everlasting righteousness. Nothing is more fundamentally related to the feast days than the concept of bringing in everlasting righteousness, because that's the harvest, followed by, catch the power of this, Shemini Atzeret, which is the 8th day celebration of Sukkot, the Feast of Harvest. And Shemini Atzeret is the new creation. It's the survival, if you will, of all of the feast days. It is man in a new world. Now, by the way, I need to make a real quick correction. In my discourse on James, and demonstrating the gap, between the first and the last of the 70th week, I pointed out in James chapter 5, you have reference to the early and the latter rain. And I inadvertently, it's what I did, I projected the our calendar onto the Jewish calendar, which was the wrong thing to do. My good friend Gerald Davis, and here's what I did. I said, I thought, okay, early, that's our spring. Late, that's our fall. So I projected that onto the Jewish calendar. Well, it's just the reverse in the Jewish calendar. Gerald sent me some really cool citations from the scholars, which verified what he was saying. So I had the reference to the early and the latter wrong, but the point is still valid of there being a 4-month period of time between the early and the latter rain. That point is very valid. It was my reference to spring being early that was wrong, and my reference to fall being latter being wrong. It's just the opposite. Okay, thanks as always to my good friend Gerald Davis for helping me out on that. Now then, I shared with you in our last video how if you take the view that the 70th week was fulfilled in AD 70, number one, that puts the fate of the city and the people outside the 70 weeks. That violates Daniel 9:24. 70 weeks are determined on your people and on your city. Now, you really, really must catch the power of this. It may be a bit repetitious, but I'm going to drive the point home this week. The last 3 of Israel's feast days cannot be divorced from the first 4. Can't be done. And we have in Daniel chapter 9 a presentation of both the initiation of the festal calendar after the 69th week, or after the 62, which means 62 plus 9, Messiah shall be cut off. That's Passover. That's the initiation of the festal calendar. So once again, the festal calendar underlies, serves as the foundation for Daniel chapter 9. But Daniel 9 also says 70 weeks are determined to make the atonement. Wait a minute. The atonement is not the Passover. I should point out that in some Jewish literature, there was a propitiatory element of Passover. But in the Jewish calendar, pardon me, obviously, Passover and Yom Kippur are separated by 4 months. You cannot have the atonement finished at the beginning of the festal calendar. Point number 2. When did the atonement take place? The atonement took place, please catch the power of this. The atonement, Yom Kippur, took place after Rosh Hashanah. After, therefore, the judgment. Now, if you're going to say that the 70 weeks of Daniel chapter 9 ended in 3435 AD, here's the first thing you have to do. You have to ignore the festal references in Daniel chapter 9. Point number 2. You have to say that the last 3 feast days were fulfilled by AD 3435. But that demands that Rosh Hashanah, which foreshadowed the judgment, and the atonement, and Sukkot were all fulfilled by 3435 AD. So let me ask you a question. When was the judgment fulfilled? When was Rosh Hashanah fulfilled? Pardon me. Well, I can tell you this. The New Testament writers, as well as Jesus himself, was predicting the sounding of the trumpet, the great trumpet, for Rosh Hashanah at the time of the fall of Jerusalem. Not 3435 AD, but at the time of the fall of Jerusalem. Matthew chapter 24, immediately after the tribulation of those days, leading up to the fall of Jerusalem, the sun will be darkened, the moon shall be turned to blood, the stars of heaven shall fail to give their light. They shall see the sign of the Son of Man in the heavens. And then they shall see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Then the Son of Man will send forth his angels with the sound of the great trumpet. Folks, there is Rosh Hashanah. That's the judgment. When is it? Was it in 3435 AD? No. But this is also the completion of the atonement. I have more to say about that later. So once again, the point of it is, if you try to have the 70 weeks ending in AD 3435, then you absolutely must do one of 2 things. Number 1, you must prove that there are no festal connections in Daniel chapter 9. I've already proven that there are. Taking away of sin, making the atonement, bringing in everlasting righteousness and judgment. At least four festal references right there in Daniel chapter 9. How do you destroy that? Or if you cannot destroy the festal references in Daniel chapter 9, then you have to be able to show that the last 3 feast days, Rosh Hashanah, which predicted and foreshadowed the judgment, the atonement, and Sukkot, the harvest, resurrection, happened in 34-35 AD. It doesn't work. Someone says, however, well, wait a minute. The atonement was finished at the cross. I used to believe that. I do not believe that that is a biblical view. So tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how the atonement was not finished at the cross. The cross was for the atonement. It initiated the atonement, but it did not consummate the atonement. You don't want to miss it. In the meantime, get a copy of my book, 70 Weeks Are Determined for the Resurrection. Go to donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, order this book. Be sure to send me a note that says you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. Okay, thanks so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Don't forget, in the morning, I'm going to begin to show you that the atonement was not finished. It wasn't perfected. It wasn't finalized at the cross. It wasn't finalized until Christ came out of the most holy place to bring the blessings of atonement, i.e., salvation. You don't want to miss it. So we'll see you on the flip side.